Hey guys, my name is Jeff Gibson. I'm with True Covenant Ministry. We're going to make a video about a timeline. About 8 months ago, the Holy Spirit, the Ruach, put it on my heart that it's time to figure out time. And we began, and the nucleus of that study was in Matthew 24, specifically in verse 3. But let's take a look at that and we'll start digging into this. And I'm going to put out there right now, I the furthest thing from my mind is trying to figure out a rapture date. That is not even on my radar. But what I am trying to figure out, and what the Holy Spirit is telling me, look, it's time to figure out where you're at in time. And so, anyway, this is kind of the journey we've been on, and it begins in Matthew 24, verse 3. Let's take a look at it. And actually, I want to go to King James first, and we'll look at King James, and then we'll go to ESV. And Joshua went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show them the buildings of the temple, showing him and saying, "Aren't they magnificent?" And Joshua said unto them, "See you not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." Um, it's important to note that they began construction, Herod began construction on that temple in 20 BC, and it was not completed until 70 AD. Literally, upon its completion, Rome totally dismantled that temple and threw it all down. Uh, right at the completion of the temple, it took them 90 years to build it. Rome tore it down in days when they finally tore it down, and it was not completed for very long. And so the Messiah, I mean, if you don't believe him, go to Jerusalem today and look where the temple used to be, and all you're going to find is a pile of rocks, stones that have been thrown down, proving the words of our Messiah were true. But let's keep going, trying to figure out time. Okay. And that shook the disciples, and so they came back to him, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" And I do not like that word world. The world does not end in this event. A more accurate description would be an end of an age, properly an age. ESV, for example, that's how it's worded. Uh, Tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Actually, the second question that they ask, what will be the sign of thy coming, is actually answered in chapter 24. So we can answer one of them right out of the gate. I think we start in verse 27. For his lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. And he says that in context to, if they say to you, "Look, he's in the wilderness, don't bother going out," or "Look, he's in the inner rooms," don't believe it, because every eye is going to see it. It's going to be as lightning from the east to the west. Everyone will see it. And then it carries on again, starts in verse 29, and immediately after the tribulation of those days. And I cannot emphasize those words enough. These are red letters. This is our Messiah. He would know when these things will be. And he says this: immediately after the tribulation of those days. He just went through the whole list of all these things that are going to happen to the world. That the world has never seen a time like this. That is a very bold statement when you hold the flood of Noah up to what he's talking about: wars and rumors of wars, pestilence, earthquakes, all of these things that are going to come upon the earth. And our Messiah says the world has never seen a time this bad. When you compare that to the flood of Noah, that is a very bold statement. Noah's flood was pretty bad, but apparently this is going to be worse. And probably the total number of lives lost will be greater in this 7 year time period than any other time in human history from Adam till now. Uh, so, anyway, uh, but in red letters, our Messiah says this. Immediately after those things, immediately after the tribulation of those days, then the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. When will these things be? What will be the sign of thy coming? Here it is, right here. This is the sign of his coming. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man coming. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they that will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And then, immediately after the tribulation of those days, he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet, the final trump. And they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Come on, Mass. Okay. So we've answered the second question right there in the book of Matthew, chapter 24. What will be the sign of thy coming? Every eye will see it, and it will be immediately after the tribulation of those days, right before the final trump, when he gathers his elect from the four corners of the earth. This is our Messiah, and he would know. He's not lying here. This is when it happens. So we can answer that question right in the text of chapter 24. But when will these things be, and what will be the end of the age? Those are still unanswered questions. We know that it began in 70 AD with the destruction of the temple. There will not be two stones left standing upon another. That began in 70 AD, at least that portion of it. But it's not saying when will that happen, but when will these things be? And he goes on to list a whole plethora of things that are coming on the earth, and then concludes with the question, what will be the end of the age? So we have to determine what is an age, right? That's a question. So let's take a look at that. Got it pulled up already. This is an AI overview, which means you believe about 80% of it. It's not, AI is not always accurate, but I've read through this and I see nothing in it that I disagree with. Biblical 2,000 year age refers to an interpretation of biblical chronology and prophecy that suggests major periods of history are marked roughly 2,000 year durations. It's not roughly, it's exactly. Often linking the idea of a 7,000 year concept for the world history or the length of the current age. What does that mean? That is the same as the Father created the earth and everything in 7 days or 6 days, and he rested on the seventh day. That the timeline for humanity will be based on that same, a day is 1,000 years. So there will be 6 days of toil for humanity. On the seventh day, that 7,000 year will be a millennial rest. But the first 6,000 years of toil are broken up into three 2,000 year ages, totaling 6,000 years. So let's keep going. Okay. pulling from Peter 3:8, which states a day is with Yahweh is 1,000 years. So we just talked about that, the 7 days of creation. This view uh, is about 2,000 years from creation to Abraham, and I'm going to be more specific, from the fall of Adam to the 50th year of Abraham was 2,000 years added up. From Abraham, when Abraham is 50 years old, what happened when Abraham was 50? Well, Jubilees tells us that Abraham went and stayed with Noah until Noah died 350 years after the flood, at which time Abraham comes back to the house of his father. And then the Bible, Genesis takes it up at about age 75, where he is told to go to a land that he'd never seen before. But from that 50-year point in Abraham's life, from Adam to that point was 2,000 years. From the calling of Abraham really beginning at 50 years old, the Bible picks it up at 75, but at the death of Noah, when Abraham was 50, until our Messiah was stretched out on a cross, and he spoke his final words, and he gave up the ghost, and he said, "It is finished." From Abraham's 50th year of Abraham to the Messiah dying on the cross was 2,000 years. From our Messiah dying on the cross, saying it is finished, until the end of the coming age would be another 2,000-year period of time. And that's what our disciples are asking the Messiah: when will these things be, and what will be the end of that age? So anyway, we have to understand the 3 ages. The fall of Adam to Abraham being 50, Abraham being 50 to the Messiah stretched out on the cross, saying it is finished. And at that moment, if there was an hourglass, a 2,000-year hourglass, it was turned over, and that brought us into the final age. Some of you have heard it called the age of grace. Some of you have heard it called the church age. A more accurate interpretation, we may get into it today, I don't know, is the age of the house of Israel, the northern 10 tribes, the house of Israel, the ones our Messiah came to redeem. When he said, I've not come except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, who go on to become the nations, who go on to become the Goyim, who are the Gentiles. It is that age, the age of the Gentiles, the Goyim, that house of Israel that was scattered and became the nations, literally. That is the age. So anyway, trying to figure out, it's time to figure out time. So some of the key things we've got to figure out. First of all, we figured out what an age is. What will be the end of the age? We know what an age is. It's a 2,000-year period of time. There are 3 of those equaling 6,000 years. From the fall of Adam to the end of the age of grace. That is a 6,000-year time period from fall of Adam to the end of the age of grace. One of the things recently the Holy Spirit, the Ruach, has put on my heart is he told me just the other day, he said, time is like a gift card. It has an expiration date. There is a time when there is no more time, right? And we are quickly approaching that date. It does not take a rocket scientist to figure out when our Messiah was hanging on a cross and said, it is finished. You add 2,000 years to that date, and that is the end of the final age. Okay. There's a pretty tight window, some people, me included in this group, think that the Messiah was crucified in the year 28 AD. We'll get into that. Others push it off to the year 32 AD, but that's really as far out as you can push that timeline. You cannot go past 32 AD, and so when we add 2,000 years to that, any third grader can tell you, if you take the year 28 AD and add 2,000 years to that, you come up with 2028, 2028. If you add 20 years to the 32 AD, you're going to come up with 2032. A very close window of time when you really get to looking at as a whole. And so uh, we're going to look at that. When is the end of the age? Well, it's got to be between 2028 and 2032. A third grader, it really is that simple. Okay. A third grader can add 2,000 years to 28 or 2,000 years to 32 and come up with that answer. It's not complicated. Um, so, anyway, some of the things we have to figure out when we're figuring out time, if we really want to get down to the nitty gritty, first of all, you need to know when the Messiah was born. You need to know when his ministry began, and you need to know when he was crucified. Those things become crucially important. And so we're going to look at that. Um, I was no scholar. There is not a scholar out there that believes our Messiah was born in year zero. He was, depending on which camp you're in, the common beliefs were that he was born in the year 2 BC, or possibly in the year 4 BC, or possibly in the year 6 BC. Those were kind of the three main groups. And I really was not able to pinpoint down a belief that I really could put my full belief in, what year he was born in. And I was doing some studying, and I guess we jumped forward in time to the year 2017. And the Revelation 12 sign. Maybe some of you remember it. On September the 23rd, 2017, there was a sign in the constellation Virgo. And Virgo, Jupiter went into Virgo's belly for 9 months and came out through the matrix, past the matrix like a birth 9 months later. On that particular day, on September 23rd, 2017, she had 12 stars above her head, which is exceedingly rare that she would ever have 12 stars. She almost always has nine, but 12 is almost unheard of. In Revelation 12, that sign says that the sun will be at her shoulder and the moon will be at her feet. And Draco the dragon, the constellation Draco, will be down below her, and the constellation of Leo will be up above her. Those things all took place in one day, September 23rd, 2017. We'll look at a visual of that here in a minute. And we were told that's the only time in history that had ever happened before. Back in 2017, they were making the claim this has never happened before. We're going to find out that it actually did happen one other time, and it's going to be part of our investigation. So let's go see if I can pull that up. Da, 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 da. No, I think it's right here. I thought it was here. Maybe I didn't move it over. Okay, how about there? There we go. I didn't move it to the right place. September 23rd, 2017, once in 7,000 years is what we were told. This sign had never happened before. The first time in history. And we probably all can remember back to some of the things that were going on. We had the four blood moons going on at Passover and Sukkot. I believe in 2014, happened again at Passover and Sukkot in 2015, I believe. And then at September 23rd, 2017, the Revelation 12 sign that is talked about, spoken about in Revelation 12:1, that actually occurred. And we were told that was the only time in history that had ever occurred. NASA has a program, and anyone can go there now. It's open to, anyone can look at it. where they have mapped out the constellations, the heavenly bodies. Everything has been put in a computer program, and they can forward that program until, for example, there will be a let's say there's a solar eclipse over Illinois, uh, December the 2nd of 20, or excuse me, let's say 30, 32 at 10:58 a.m. And it will be dead on to the second because the stars do not slow down, they do not speed up, they're constant. That's why they're a timepiece that our Father gave us in Genesis, uh, to look at them for times and seasons, because they never change. They're always accurate. Okay, but you can also take NASA's timeline and take it back in reverse. And you can go back 1,000 years and find out when a solar eclipse, let's say, happened over Egypt in 958 AD, over Cairo at 6 o'clock in the evening. And it would be precise to the second. It's that accurate. But you can also take the constellations and they move around too, right? And they can take that Revelation 12 sign and ask, did this ever happen before? And some people actually did that. They went on to NASA's website and they asked the question, has this ever happened before? We were told that was the first time in 7,000 years. Actually, NASA's computer came back and said, no, that's happened before. It happened on 3 BC. And the people that were putting out that article didn't really find the significance. I knew as soon as I read that, that was the birth of the Messiah. Right then, right there. The Magi were looking at Virgo and watching Jupiter in her belly when Jupiter came through the matrix, just like it did in 2017. When that happened in 3 BC, the Magi were all saying, hey, boys, let's saddle up the camels. The Messiah's been born and we've got to get there. That was the sign the Magi followed. But anyway, let's keep going. And so I decided that's got to be 3 BC. And so I actually, when I figured that out about 8 months ago, uh, God tells us, if I'm going to show you something, there will always be two witnesses to it. And so I'm like, okay, well, if this is true, there will be two other witnesses to it. And I looked and I could not find them. I accidentally stumbled across them. And, in the weeks that followed, I stumbled upon two witnesses before I ever mentioned it to our group, because until I had it confirmed, I wasn't going to say nothing. But two witnesses popped up. One of them was a Seventh day Adventist who had actually calculated the time from Abraham to the Messiah. And he said, guys, I'm coming up with 3 BC on the Feast of Trumpets. He was dead on right. I'm kind of letting a little bit of the cat out of the bag there. But the other one was a gentleman by the name of Michael Rood. And I had no clue that he was going to talk about this, but in a video that I watched, and I'd never seen it before, he talked about the 70 weeks of Daniel and how our Messiah was born in 3 BC. And I can remember when I saw that, it was like, I really want to know how he came up with the year 3 BC. And I didn't really figure that out until today. I did get the answer to that. We may talk about it. But anyway, so back 8 months ago, really wasn't on. I told our group, look, it was 3 BC. I'm sure of it. It was 3 BC. The Holy Spirit has confirmed it in my heart. And today when I go online and look, people are coming out of the woodworks and, hey, it was 3 BC, 3 BC on the Feast of Trumpets, 3 BC. Again, I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit. But let's go take a look. When I ask Google, was there a Revelation 12 sign in 3 BC? Let's look at Google's response. Okay, now I do need to back up. Okay. Okay, and I just asked the question, did the Revelation 12 sign appear in 3 BC? And again, this is AI. but it's right. I've confirmed that what it's saying is right. According to NASA's uh, constellation program that shows the movement of the constellations forward or backwards. Uh, and this happened once before in 3 BC. And so, yes, it did happen. Some interpretations of the book of Revelation 12 connect the celestial sign of September 11th, 3 BC. And then it goes on to tell what the sign was. The woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, a crown of 12 stars, and astronomical alignment of the constellation Virgo with the sun and the moon. Okay, so I asked, and that was the response. Yes, it did happen in 3 BC on September the 11th, 3 BC. So I asked, what was the significance of uh, September 11th of 3 BC. In 3 BC, the Feast of Trumpets, also known as Rosh Hashanah, occurred on September the 11th, 3 BC. Well, how is that so important? Because in 2017, if you remember, September 23rd, 2017, when that happened in 2017, it was on the September 23rd was the Feast of Trumpets. Okay, that happened on the Feast of Trumpets 2017. That also happened 3 BC 2017 on the Feast of Trumpets. It's happened twice. And I knew when I read that that was the birthday of our Messiah. So we, trying to figure out time, the first thing we have to do is figure out, where it affects us at the end of time. We have to know when our Messiah was born. Was it 2 BC, 4 BC, 6 BC? 3 was not even on my radar. And when I came up with that 3 BC date 8 months ago, I was like in the wilderness by myself. There was no one else. I'd found two other people that had come out and said, hey, it was 3 BC. But back then, there was not a lot of people saying that, none that I could find other than those two. Now it's common. Everybody, it's an interpretation that's coming up, blowing up everywhere. Let's take a look. This is just one I pulled up. When was our Messiah born? The Living Truth Fellowship. It is established that the eclipse recorded in Josephus occurred on January the 9th, 1 BC, and that it was long before this that Herod interviewed the Magi concerning the appearance of the star. I think it was Jupiter in Virgo's belly that they were following. In 2 BC, when Herod interviewed the Magi. When Herod discovered that the Magi would not be returning, he arranged to have the children in Bethlehem killed and specified that they must be 2 years old according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Matthew 2:16 tells us Herod would not have specified 2 years as the upper limit unless he knew from his diligent inquiry of the Magi that the child was born during 3 BC. I looked all over 8 months ago for other people coming out with that 3 BC date for birth, and there were none. Other than the two. Seventh day Adventist came out, said that, and Michael Rood had said that, but I looked for weeks and could not find others. Now it's everywhere. That is becoming the accepted date for the birth of the Messiah, and I think it's dead on right. Okay, so now we know the birth of the Messiah. So the next important thing that we have, it's time to figure out time. So what is the next important thing? We have to know when our Messiah, when his ministry began, right? And it talks about that. Let's see. Let's go to Luke 4 and let's look at this. This is the beginning of the Messiah's ministry in Luke 4. So that becomes important, right? When did his ministry actually begin? Luke 4 tells us that. Luke 4, when we start out in 14. let's just start. Uh, Joshua, let's go back to 14. Joshua returned in the spirit to Galilee. So he'd been baptized. He went into the wilderness 40 days. He has not even chosen his disciples yet at this point. But this is the beginning of his ministry. And a report went out through all of the surrounding country, and he taught in their synagogues and being glorified by all. And he came to Nazareth, and where he had been brought up, as it was his custom, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. And the scroll of prophet Isaiah was given to him. That's important. I'm going to key in on that. He unrolled the scroll and found a place where it was written, "The Spirit of Yahweh is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives." Who are these people he came for? The lost sheep of the house of Israel. They were still in captivity. Judah had been out of captivity 600 years by this point, or nearly 500 and a lot of change. Uh, but Israel had already been gone 700 years. The 10 northern tribes had been cast out and had not returned now for 750 years at this point. So he had come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He came to proclaim liberty to the captives. They were still captive. Judah was captive in Babylon for 70 years, then they returned. Israel was captive 720 years earlier, 750 years earlier. They had still not returned. They were still captive and scattered to the nations. And to this day, they have not returned. Uh, Sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, recovering sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the year of Yahweh's favor. And then he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And we're going to see how unusual that event was. And the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him, like, "Is that it? Are you done?" And then he began to say to them, "Today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." Okay, I tried for 20 years to figure out, when did that event happen. I would love to know when that event happened. That began his ministry. And because I knew that we couldn't base it off a Julian calendar, right? The Julian calendar is not God's calendar. I did not believe the Jewish calendar that is nothing more than a Babylonian calendar that the Jews dragged back out of Babylon with them. There are many pagan things on that calendar that were not in God's calendar. So I knew we really couldn't go by the Jewish calendar that they come dragging back out of Babylon with back, when they came back from Babylon. The Jewish calendar today is nothing more than the Babylonian calendar from 600 BC that they drug back out of Babylon with them. Same months of the year, same everything. It's identical to the Babylonian calendar, which is not God's calendar, and you cannot trust it that way. So I'm trying to figure out, how do we find out then when this happened? When did he walk into the synagogue in Nazareth and they hand him the Isaiah scroll? Had a big, that's a huge clue right then of what time of year it was that he read that. I can tell you in just a second exactly the significance of that Isaiah scroll. But get back on cue here. There was not an accurate enough calendar to go by. Well, recently, the word has come out in the last several years about a calendar that was found in Qumran, which goes back to the book of Enoch, that the father told Enoch, "This is the calendar." Okay, we forward through time, and at the time of King David, the Zedekite priesthood was established as the predominant priesthood. And it upheld David upheld the Zedekite priesthood, and the Zedekite priesthood in return upheld the kingship of David and established that kingship. And God tells us in the book of Ezekiel that the Zedekite priest would always be the one to determine. It's going to be in about chapter 44, I think, of Ezekiel, somewhere in there, when talking about rebuilding the temple. The Zedekite priesthood would always, throughout eternity, be the one to decide right from wrong, what's true and what's not true. We find out now, a whole nother teaching, but in Qumran, who shows up to begin in Qumran, the teaching in Qumran? At first, it's all these Levite priests that are kicked out by the Maccabees and replaced by Sanhedrin, Pharisee, and Sadducees. They were not the priests of the temple. They were never to be the priests of the temple. The Levites were, but they were kicked out and pushed aside by the Maccabees. They end up going to a place called Qumran. You might have heard of that. The Dead Sea Scrolls came from there. And when they look at the earliest writings in Qumran, you see all these priests that said, all this is our own fault. We caused this. We are here because of our own failure. And so they're in exile in a place called Qumran. They're not hiding. Nobody, it's not a fortress or nothing. They're just in exile. While the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Sanhedrin take their place in the temple. And about 20 years in to them being at Qumran, then all of a sudden a Levite priest shows up and he said, "Okay, guys, I'm here to straighten you out." And this is all recorded in the writings of Qumran. And what he does is reestablishes the calendar. Now, they had come back dragging this old calendar out of Babylon with them. God says that the head of the year will be, 14 days before Passover. That's the new year. But yet, when they come dragging this calendar out of Babylon, all of a sudden their New Year's Day is in the beginning of the seventh month. It's not the first month anymore. It's the beginning of the seventh month. And we're going to look at that. And clearly, God never told them to change New Year's, the head of the year, but they did it. And it's because that was the head of the year in Babylon. So their calendar was totally jacked from the time they came out. So this Zedekite priest in Qumran is saying, okay, first thing first, let's reestablish the true calendar. And this is the calendar that has resurfaced in the last few years. It actually was leaked out. They didn't want it getting out because still today the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Sanhedrin are the rabbis. They still don't like this calendar. And they didn't want it getting out, but somebody took photocopies and leaked it out, and now the world has seen it, and it's spreading like a wildfire. And so this is the calendar we're going to look at. And what an amazing calendar it is. From the time I've tried to figure out for 20 years, literally, when the Messiah walked in the synagogue, opened up the Torah scroll to Isaiah, it was handed to him, the Isaiah scroll. Huge clue in that. And then he opened it up and he read verse 1 and half of verse 2. First of all, let's look at what he actually read from the book of Isaiah. Okay. Isaiah, it would have been 61. He read verse 1 and 2. Come on. 61. And he said this is what Isaiah said. The scroll of Isaiah was handed to him, and he read these verses. He said, "The Spirit of Yahweh is upon me, because Yahweh has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of prisons to those that are bound, to proclaim the year of Yahweh's favor." And he stopped right there. He did not go on. He never read the second half of the second verse. A lot to talk about in that. He stopped in the middle of a verse, and then he went and sat down, and he said, "You have seen this fulfilled in your sight today." There's a lot in that whole picture going on that we're not going to have time to talk about, but he did not even get through the second verse before he rolled it back up and said, okay, now you've seen this fulfilled in your sight today. And everyone in that synagogue had to be looking at him like, really? That's it? You're going to read 1.5 verses? And then you're going to sit down and be done? That's not how that works. When you're up there to read, and let's look at what should have been read. Okay. That's a huge clue of when this happened in time. Every year, still to this day, the Jewish rabbis, they read in the synagogues every year a Torah portion beginning in Genesis at the beginning of the year, going through Deuteronomy at the end of the year. It's the same verses read every year in week 1, year to year. Everything in week 5 is the same year to year to year. The same verses every year in week 1, week 5, week 50, whatever. And then the final time of the year would end up the very last reading of the Torah until the beginning of the next year when it would start again in Genesis. Okay, that's the Torah reading. There's also a half Torah reading. And we can tell by what he read, where they were in time. And let's take a look at that. Let's see if I can find it here. No, that's not it. Man, I must not have pulled it over. Okay. Maybe this is it. Nope, that's not it. I didn't pull it over like it was. Okay. Calendar. Maybe, yeah, this is it. I should have pulled it over and I didn't. Sorry about the delay. Okay, so this is the Torah reading for the year. And what we find out is they drag this old calendar back out of Babylon with them. And the end of the year on this Babylonian calendar is at the end of the 6th month. The beginning of the 7th month starts the new year on this Babylonian calendar that we have today as a Jewish calendar. The 7th month is not only the Feast of Trumpets on that day, the first day of the 7th month, but it's also called Rosh Hashanah, the New Year. God never told him to make New Year on the 7th month. He said that would be on the 1st month, 14 days before Passover, but still, that's where they were. And this is where they were when our Messiah walked into the synagogue. And so we know when each Torah portion and half Torah portion are read. The very last Torah portion of the year and half Torah portion, Deuteronomy 29 is the end of the Torah portion for the year. Then they start the new year and start over again in Genesis the next week, right? The week following that, after the new year. Isaiah is the half Torah portion to be read, the final half Torah portion for the year, right? Then they go on the next year and they start over, going through the prophets again. So when we look at what our Messiah read, he was actually supposed to read Isaiah 61:10, but he didn't. He did not read 61:10. He read 61 verse 1 and half of verse number 2. This is the only time they're anywhere close to that. And so that tells me when it happened. Okay, it was the final Torah reading of the year, the final half Torah reading of the year. Let's take a look at what that looks like on a calendar. Okay. So this is actually the Zedekiah calendar that has just resurfaced in the last handful of years. And so what we find is that on the final Torah reading of the year would have been on the 28th day of the 6th month. The next week would begin the new year on this calendar that they drove out of Babylon. The Feast of Trumpets would also be what is called Rosh Hashanah, the New Year's Day. So they would begin their Torah reading all over again on the next Sabbath, right? They would begin back in Genesis. They would go through the Haftorah, beginning again at the beginning, and go through the whole cycle again the next year. So we know that our Messiah walked into the synagogue. What's the significance of all these things? Well, number one, that had to be the 28th day of the 6th month in the year 26 BC. Well, that's a lot of information to pull out of that, right? How do you come by all that? Well, his birthday would have been this particular year would have been September the 17th on the Feast of Trumpets. He was born on the Feast of Trumpets, 11 September 11th, 3 BC, on the Feast of Trumpets, right? So he turns 30 years old then, right here. His ministry began at 30 years old. So he comes into the synagogue days before his 30th birthday, and he said, "Look, I'm here to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh, not this old calendar you drug back out of Babylon. I don't care about this tradition stuff you came bringing back out of Babylon. I'm here to tell you the acceptable year of Yahweh." But he does it the week prior to their New Year's Day. The 28th day of the 6th month, the 7th month of the year, begins the new year, still to this day in the Jewish calendar, would begin on the Feast of Trumpets. If you look at the Feast of Trumpets is also called in modern calendar, another word for it is Rosh Hashanah, New Year's Day. But God never told them to make that New Year's Day. Okay. So, that's pretty important. You know, it's time to figure out time. We figured out when our Messiah was born, Feast of Trumpets, 3 BC. We figured out what day when did he walk into that synagogue? And they handed him the scroll to Isaiah. That was a big clue. He wasn't just opening it up, reading willy-nilly. They gave him the scroll of Isaiah to read from. He was supposed to open it up to Isaiah 61, verse 10. But he didn't do that. He went to 61 verse 1 and verse 2. And then let's look real quick because it's important because he stopped in the middle of verse 2. Why did he stop in the middle of verse 2? Come on out of the way. The Spirit of Yahweh is upon me because Yahweh has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh's favor. And then he stopped. Full breaks, dead on stop. Why did he stop there? And actually, the rabbis asked him, "Why are you stopping? Why'd you stop? You can't stop in the middle of a verse. And on top of that, you're not even supposed to read that verse. You're supposed to start out in verse 10. But why, you know, and he rolled the scroll up and went and sat down, and every eye was upon him, right? First of all, that's not what you're supposed to read. Second of all, why did you stop in the middle of a sentence? You can't stop like that. Why did he not read on? You know, I've watched a clip of this on a series called The Chosen, and they nailed it. He went and sat in the seat of Moses, which is, don't do that. You ain't supposed to do that unless you're going to read straight from the Torah. And then he begins talking. Look, you've seen this fulfilled in your eyes today. And the rabbi is like, why are you sitting in the seat of Moses? And why did you stop in the middle of verse 2? Why don't you continue on to talk about the day of vengeance? And the Messiah said, I'm not here for the day of vengeance. Not now. That's not why I'm here. Let's read the second half of that verse. The rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say, that's coming. Why did he stop there? To proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh's favor. And he stopped. And the rabbi said, why did you stop there? Why are you sitting in the seat of Moses, which is a big no-no? You shouldn't be doing that. And secondly, and every eye is on him. And secondly, why did you stop in the middle of, you read a verse and a half and you stop? Why did you not read the rest of the verse to proclaim the year of Yahweh's favor and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all them that mourn. And on the chosen, they did a very good job, actually. And the rabbi's like, why did you stop? And why didn't you go on to talk about the day of vengeance of Yahweh? And the Messiah said, because that's not why I'm here, not now. Later, I will be here for that, but not now. I'm here this year to set the captives free. There will be a time when I will return with the vengeance. A common misconception about our Messiah's return when he comes again is that he's going to be this little fuzzy, cute, cuddly little lamb. And no, he is going to be a lion from the tribe of Judah that will utterly destroy anything that is not his. Not some cute little lamb, not this time. This time when he comes back, he will fulfill the second half of verse 2, proclaiming vengeance of Yahweh on the world, not as a lamb, but as a lion. But when they ask him, why didn't you finish the sentence? He said, because that's not why I'm here, not now. I will do that later. But that's not why I'm here right now. I've come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel right now. But a time is coming when I will come back as a ruling, reigning king. And I will put the world under my rod. And I will rule the world. But not now. Okay, so that's a lot to establish a timeline. But now that you know what it is, I'm going to, the Ruach in the last week has told me, okay, put out on a video. We've been talking about this in our group about a timeline. We've been talking about 2025 for years now, and how the end of 2025 is going to have huge significance. It's going to birth something. We've been talking about this for years now. And as we get closer to the event, we're starting to see more and more of the picture. And what we're going to get into here is events that are going to happen in the next 7 years. We're not going to look at preachers or teachers or what, different people have to say about these events at the end of time. We're going to be looking to financial advisors who have worked for President Bush, one of them, and has come out and saying, wait a minute, man, I was so screwed up. She said, I see now that we are about to put our people through this digital currency that's coming. We are going to enslave all of humanity. Very similar to events that we talked about in the tribulation, in fact, identical to the events in the tribulation. We're going to be listening to the sharpest people on the planet when it comes to AI, the very people that created AI, giving a very stark warning about things that are going to begin in 2025 and kind of culminate in 2027, and then carry on, that will enslave humanity. These people are not coming at these things from a biblical standpoint, right? These are lay people. They're the brightest minds on the planet who are saying, 2025, we're talking about a timeline, right? And so we're going to be looking at things coming on the earth, the perfect storm of all these events that are going to hit beginning at the fall of 2025, in the fall feast, by the way, not by accident, and the timeline of that. I think right now I am going to go back and, I did say that when I first found out about 3 BC, and I was looking for other people, how did they come up? I found two. I found a Seventh-day Adventist that had come up with 3 BC, adding up the days on the Feast of Trumpets. And I was like, that guy's right. Exactly what I had figured out from the Revelation 12 sign happening in 3 BC on the Feast of Trumpets. And then I watched a gentleman by the name of Michael Rood, and something that he made a claim that the Messiah was born in 3 BC. And I was like, how in the world did he come up with that date? I would love to know, because he didn't do it the way I did it, because that astronomical chart that NASA had was not available to him when he made that video back in 2019. He did not have that at his disposal. How did he come up with 3 BC? So it has bugged me for the last 8 months. How did Michael Rood come up with the date of 3 BC? And here's how he did it. Let's take a look.
Search for truth. I prefer to leave off the narrative introduction, and it came to pass in those days, and get right to the historical and astronomical facts embedded into this real life story. Again, verse 1, there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all subjects of the empire must be registered. In the 25th year of the reign of Caesar Augustus, which occurred in the year 3-2 BCE, before the common error in Roman church chronology, all subjects of Rome were required to register their support for naming Caesar Augustus the father of the Roman Empire. After the enrollment was completed, on February 5th, 2 BCE, the Roman Senate signed into law the declaration that the divine emperor Octavius Augustus was Patri Patriae. The statue of Caesar Augustus, sculpted for this occasion, still stands in the streets of Rome today. One of the few statues of the empire that is still intact after 2,000 years. It is a monument to the veracity of Luke's chronology and testimony to the year in which Yeshua was born. This enrollment was conducted when Cyrenius was serving as an administrative official in Syria. Cyrenius actually served in Syria 2 times as a governor and administrative official of Rome. The first time was in the year 3-2 BCE, when he was sent to oversee the regional registration. Verse 3, to fulfill this obligation, everyone was required to register at their ancestral village. Because Joseph was of the house and lineage of David, he left the village of Nazareth in the Galilee and went up to Bethlehem, the village of David in Judea, to register for the census. And he took his espoused wife Miriam, who was great with child. Far more significant than the Roman emperor's proclamations exaggerating his overinflated ego, the Almighty commanded all Israelite males to go up to the feast of Yahovah 3 times a year. Yosef need not make a special trip to Bethlehem to register with Rome. He will be in Jerusalem 3 times that year for the feast. And Bethlehem is only 5 miles up the path.
And so that's how Michael Rood came up with the date of 3 BC, and he was right. And that on the way to the fall feast, specifically, the Feast of Trumpets begins a fall feast. Our Messiah was born on the Feast of Trumpets, 3 BC. Anyway, we're having to lay out a big foundation for a timeline. It's time to figure out time. And so, anyway, the Holy Spirit has put on my heart. You've been talking about these dates now for years. It's time to actually write them down, make a chart, something visual for people to look at. And so that's what I've done. And let's take a look real quick at some of the whiteboards that I've put together. Let's begin with this one. Now we've kind of gone through the crux of my understanding of where the 3 BC birth of the Messiah comes from on the Feast of Trumpets. Then on the 6th day of the 6th month and the 28th day of the year 26 AD begins his ministry. Why is that important? Let me get out of here. Okay, so how does that become important? first of all, my viewpoint's a little different than most people. I do not believe he had a 3.5 year ministry. The first time we hear anything about a 3.5 year ministry comes from a man by the name of Eusebius, about the time of Constantine, exactly the time of Constantine. He was a biographer for Constantine. So he was the first one really to propose a 3.5 year ministry, and there's a lot of shady stuff going on with that. But irregardless, all of the church fathers before Eusebius agreed that the ministry was about a year and a half long, not 3.5 years. Uh, Eusebius made it a 3.5 year ministry so it would fit. He's trying to force a square peg into a round hole and make the 3.5 year ministry fit what is talked about in the 70 weeks of Daniel in 927 specifically. And so he tries to force that into a 3.5 year ministry, and that's the beginning of a 3.5 year ministry. All of the early church fathers said no, it was only a year and a half long. So, what is the importance of that? Well, he walks into the synagogue at the fall feast when he turns 30 years old. His ministry began in the year 20. Remember, on the Jewish calendar, the year started that next week when he walks into that. After he walked into the synagogue in Nazareth, the next Sabbath begins the next year. So in 26 AD, he goes into the synagogue. 27 AD, on the Feast of Trumpets, his ministry begins when he turns 30 years old, 4 days later. He goes from the Feast of Trumpets, he goes all the way around back to Passover of the following year, which would be 27 AD, right? He was not crucified in 27 AD. He goes from there from 27 AD back around again, one full year to Passover of 28 AD, and that puts the crucifixion of the Messiah on the Feast of Passover in 28 AD. Okay, so that becomes huge because when he is crucified on that cross, right, that ends the age. You have the age of Adam, the fall of Adam, to Abraham at 50 years old. You have the Abraham at 50 years old to the fall, or to the Messiah being on the cross saying it is finished. And that hourglass, that 2,000 year hourglass, it's turned over from the fall of Adam, and it runs out of sand by the time Abraham is 50 years old, and that hourglass is turned over again, and it takes us to the next 2,000 years, to the Messiah being on that cross saying it is finished. That hourglass is turned over again for a final time, for that final age. We know it's called the age of grace, the church age, that final 2,000 year age. When will these things be? What will be the sign of thy coming? And when will be the end of the age? Okay. Uh, so uh, I am fully convinced of a crucifixion date of 28 AD at Passover. However, if you look at it and you say, Jeff, you're totally wrong. You're totally wrong. We know he was crucified in 32 AD. Okay, take it forward to 32 AD. It really don't make a whole lot of difference. I'm saying that you add 2,000 years to 28 AD, you come to 2028. If you add 2,000 years to the year 32 AD, a third grader will tell you that's 2032. That's the end of the age. That has huge implications. What happens then? Well, the Messiah begins in verse 4 and starts telling all of the things that are going to happen at the end of that age, right? There's going to be famines, pestilence, earthquakes. All of these signs are going to happen at the end of that age. And there's going to be a plethora of things hitting. The perfect storm is going to hit humanity in a few short years that will make it the worst period of time in human history, worse even than the flood of Noah, according to our Messiah. The world is going to be under a barrage of things, and that's what we're going to look at here in this timeline. Once we establish the timeline, we're going to get into what these people are saying about what's coming in the very, very, very near future. Not Bible scholars and preachers and teachers, but the people on the cutting edge of the things that are coming upon the earth are warning people, saying it's getting ready to get bad. And so, anyway, that's where we're headed with all this. But let's look at our timeline. Okay, so maybe it'll make a little more sense. Okay, so we have our Messiah being born in 3 BC. On the 6th month, 28th day in the year 26 AD, our Messiah begins his ministry, which carries through until the crucifixion at Passover 28 AD. If you say, Jeff, you're totally wrong, add 5 years to that. Okay, take it to 32 or 4 years. Really don't make that a whole lot of difference. At that point, it begins a 2,000-year age of grace to the Gentiles, the church age. When would that end? Well, if it's 28 AD, it ends in 2028. If you want to stick to your guns and say, no, I still think it's 32, put a 32 at the end of that, 2032. You can't see my mouse. I don't know, it's stupid on a whiteboard. You can't see my mouse, but I'm pointing at it. But anyway, that is that timeline. Okay, the Holy Spirit said, put these things down on paper. Put down what I'm showing you and put it out there for everybody to see. Okay, so now let's go on to the next whiteboard. We're going to look, let's see, which one do I want? Let's look at the ages. You know, we've talked about that. We're talking about ages here. When will these things be? What'll be the sign of the coming, and when will be the end of the age? An age is a 2,000-year period of time, specifically beginning at the fall of Adam to the point of Abraham being 50 years old. I don't think you can see my mouse here, but I'm putting it on Abraham. So it's the first 2,000 years is the age of chaos, which at Abraham, that hourglass is turned over again. The next age begins, specifically at his 50th birthday, begins what is known as the age of Torah. We talked about this, the 3 ages, the age of the first age of, the age of catastrophe, I think it called it. But it was from Adam to Abraham. Then the age of Torah, from Abraham to the Passover in the year 28 AD, which marked the 4,000-year period of time. And begins the age of the Gentiles or grace. And so that then becomes called the church age or the age of grace. And it's the final 2,000-year period that begins at 28 AD, I believe, and goes to 2028 to the end of that age. Okay, we have just answered the third question. When will these things be? What will be the sign of that coming? We figured that one out. When is the end of the age? We just now, whether you choose 28 AD as a crucifixion or 32 AD, take your pick. It ended in 28 or 32. So add 2,000 years to that, and you come up with 2028 or 2032 ends that age. When will be the sign of that coming? And what will be the sign of that coming, and what will be the end of the age? Right there it is. Okay, so we've answered the first two, or the second question and the third question. And we've actually begun to answer the first question, when will these things be? Well, that happened. It began in 70 AD when the temple was torn down, right? So we've put at least partial answer on even the first question. And then, depending on where you're at, 2028 or 2032, you're going to begin the final 1,000 years, the millennial reign, which will lead up to 7,000 years, which is set up on the basis of a week. 6 days the Father created the earth, worked, and on the seventh day he rested. There will be 6,000 years in human history. A day is 1,000 years to Yahweh. 1,000 years a day. 6,000 years, or 6 days he worked, 7th day he rested. 6,000 years humans will toil, And on the 7,000 year, the millennial reign will be a reign 1,000 years of rest. Okay. Um, so we've looked at those timelines. The Holy Spirit told me, it's time to figure out time. And so, uh, excuse me, those are two timelines that we've figured out in the last 8 months. Let's look at that third. Oops, I don't want to do that. Get out of there. Stop. Let's go back to whiteboard, look at the final timeline. Now, after we look at this final timeline, we're going to start getting into things that are coming and how fast they're going to come upon the earth. And they are knocking at the door. Okay, last timeline. I think it's this one. Maybe not. Maybe that's the one we just did. No. Yeah, we've already looked at that one. Okay. So let's look at the other one. I pulled the wrong one up. Okay, that must be this one. Yeah. Okay. So my timeline, final timeline that I wanted to show everybody is it begins with the Revelation 12 sign in 2017. That was a huge sign, right? We had a blood moon on Passover in 2014, a blood moon on Sukkot in 2014 in Jerusalem. 2015, we have a blood moon over Jerusalem on Passover. We have a blood moon over Jerusalem on Sukkot. That's not unprecedented. It's happened several times. Every time it does happen, something big happens. 1949, the Jews had just returned to land in May 14th, 1948. It happened 68 in the year 1968. The Jews had just taken back Jerusalem for the first time uh, and took control of Jerusalem in 1967. So there are big events that preceded this. But anyway, and then we go to September 23rd, 2017, the Revelation 12 sign in 2017. That was a big billboard in the sky, God saying, wake up. Okay, something's about to happen. And we're going to talk about the things coming upon the earth in 2025, the fall specifically. We've been talking about this for years as a group. But now we're starting to see all of the things that are fixing to drop in the fall of 2025. Everything from the UFO Disclosure Act in the fall of 2025 to warnings about AI that are going to begin in 2025 to warnings about the economy in 2025 to 2027. These are going to be reoccurring dates by the people at the cutting edge of all these things. How the economy is going to enslave humanity. You know, we read about that in Revelation. In the final 7 year timeline, no one will be able to buy or sell without a mark because they control people through the economy. And all of these things, and the one thing they're going to have in common, these are not preachers, teachers, or anything like that. These are cutting edge scientists, businessmen, financial leaders, saying the very things they're describing are exactly the things we read about. Not kind of like, not a little bit like, they are exactly what we were warned about in that final 7 year time frame. And how that these things are going to begin in the year 2025. 2027 is another very huge year. 2028 is another very huge year. 2032 it's all over but the crying. It's done. And then that final millennial reign. That's my timeline. The Messiah, or excuse me, the Holy Spirit told me it's time to figure out time. I could care less about a rapture. That's not why I'm trying to figure out time. It's trying to figure out where we're at in time. The Messiah said in Matthew 24, 31, 32, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun and the moon will be dark and the stars are going to fall from heaven. Then you'll see the sign of the Son of Man coming in heaven when every eye is going to see it. don't, if they tell you he's over there, don't believe it. If they say he's in there, don't believe it. Because every eye, when it happens, every eye will see it. And immediately after the tribulation of those days, uh, then the sign of the Son of Man coming. And then it says, Yahshua will send out his angels, and with that final trumpet will blow, and they will gather his elect from the four corners of the earth immediately after the tribulation of those days. I'm not worried about when that happens. I want to know about these other things and when they're going to happen. Because if the Messiah is true, if what he's saying is the truth, we're going through this thing, and it will be the worst time in human history, according to our Messiah. If he's to be believed, this is the worst time in human history. And if you have not got your head wrapped around what's coming, will you be able to withstand everything that's coming if you're not prepared for it? And I would say that 80% of the people know. I think if they shut off your cell phones, a lot of people would say, "All right, just give me the mark. I got to have my cell phone." Electricity, yeah, give me the mark. I got to have my electric TV. Uh, go ahead, I'll take it. It must not be true anyway because I'm still here, right? I didn't get taken up out of here, so this can't really be the mark. Just go ahead and sign me up. Um, it really is the mark, and it's coming, and I don't think people will be prepared for it. Uh, and so that timeline becomes crucial because if we do go through all these things, you better have your head around it before it happens. Let's keep going. I don't even know where I'm at on 3 o'clock. I think we're going to shut it down here next week. We've established the timeline. If you haven't seen it yet, the first part of this, it's mainly for our Zoom group. I didn't put it out there for people necessarily to find it on the YouTube and go there. But if you happen if you happen to have some time on your hands and get out of there. All right. And you want to go and look at the first video. I think this is it. This is the one we just put out last week. And I'm going to set this up and then we're going to shut it down. The video I just made last week was the coming 3.5 year war with the seed of the serpent. And it's coming, right? The UFO Disclosure Act, it's about ready to be revealed. What are they going to be talking about? It's already being leaked out that there really is no God. Aliens created humanity eons ago, and now they're back to see how we're doing. Get out. That's not what's. We're the warning in Matthew 24 is not that you're going to change any of these things that are happening. If it were possible, even my very elect will be deceived. What are they still doing here? If I had not come back early, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, I'm going to come back early. What are they still doing here when all these things are going on? All these things are going to happen in Matthew 24. And over, it's not telling you these things so you can try to change them somehow. You're not going to change them. These things are written in stone. They're coming. What he's telling you is do not be deceived. If it were possible, even my elect will be deceived by these things. So, maybe if you think about these things before they actually happen, you won't be deceived by them. Otherwise, you're probably going to fall for it. The Messiah says, broad is the path and wide is the road that leads to death, but straight is the gate and narrow is the way that leads to life, and few there's going to be that find it. These are not my words. Again, those are red letters. But back to that video, the Serpent Seed War, that 3.5 year war. this is what we talked about in the first video at Serpent Seed War, and I'm going to end up with this. We're going to go back to Genesis and talk about this war. Let's go back to Genesis 3. I think I want to focus in on around 13. So what are we talking about? This is Adam and Eve in the garden. They just ate of the apple. The serpent has tempted Eve. She blamed, and then she got Adam to eat it. The father came and says, "Hey, Adam, where are you?" He said, "Well, I was hiding in the trees because I'm naked." And he said, "How did you know you're naked? Who told you that? Did you eat from that tree?" And he said, "Yeah, that woman that you gave me. It's kind of your fault because you gave her to me. But that woman that you gave me, she enticed me and I did eat it." And he said, "Okay, woman, what happened?" And she said, "Well, it was the serpent. He beguiled me and I did eat it." And then he goes to the serpent. They kept passing the buck. Adam passed it to Eve. Eve blamed the serpent. But the buck stopped there, and God said, "Okay." And here's where we take it up about verse 13 in Genesis. And this serpent seed war begins right here. Genesis 3, about 13. Let's go back to, yeah, that's probably. Uh, then Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent beguiled me, and I ate it." And Yahweh said, "Okay." Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the serpent. "Okay, serpent, the buck stops with you." And Yahweh said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field, and on your belly you shall go, and the dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. And he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." This begins the serpent war, but the seed war between the woman and her offspring, her seed, and the serpent and his seed. There's a seed war that began right there. This is in the beginning of the book in Genesis. Let's go to the very end of the book, and we're going to look at the climax of that serpent seed war. We're going to take that up in Revelation 12, about verse 14. Revelation 12:14. We're still at the end of the book talking about that seed war between the woman and the serpent, between her seed and his seed. So we're going to start in 12 and start about verse 14. But the woman was giving two. So here's the woman, right? There's half the characters, but in the seed war, your seed will be at odds with. I'm going to put enmity between your seed and her seed. Uh, and the woman. So this is the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Serpent seed war. The woman was given two wings of a great eagle that she might fly from the serpent. Here's the other. Here's the serpent. You have the woman and you have the serpent. Same two characters. Into the wilderness, to a place where she is to be nourished for a time, time and a half, 3.5 years, that final 3.5 years of tribulation. And the serpent poured water out out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. So the serpent is trying to destroy the seed of the woman in the very same way that God destroyed the seed of the serpent in the flood of Noah, right? He destroyed them in a flood. And the serpent is trying to redo that same thing to the seed of the woman, but the father said, "No, I don't think so." But the earth came to help the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went to make war with the rest of her offspring. I like the King James actually better there. Uh, let's go back and read it. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. This is still a continuation of the seed war that began in the Garden of Eden. Who are these people, by the way? How do you know what this remnant of the woman. How can you identify these people? The ones that the serpent is furious with. The dragon was wroth with the woman, went to make war with the remnant of her seed. There will be that final time and a half of time, that final 3.5 years. There will be a serpent seed war with the seed of the woman that is going to come to a climax in that time and half of time, final 3.5 years. How do you identify who are these people who are the remnant of her seed? How do you know what they are, who they are? Well, these are they which keep the commandments of Elohim. We call that the Torah, and have a testimony of Yahshua HaMashiach. You can read more about them in Revelation 14 and about verse 12. These same people, the same remnant of the woman, who are keeping the commandments of Elohim, which we call the Torah, and have a testimony of the Messiah in the final time and half time, 3.5 year time period. There is a war climax coming, the final 3.5 years of that 7 year tribulation that will come to a climax in the final 3.5 years of the tribulation. And it will be a climax of the seed war that began in the Garden of Eden when the Father said, I will put enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. And we read about it ultimately clear up until, the Revelation 19. We're still talking about that. And really it's put to rest when Satan is cast down into the pit. That's the culmination of that seed war, at least for 1,000 years. And then there's a small rebellion at the end of that time. So it kind of rebirths again at the end of the millennial reign. And all we know is it's put down. And really, after that, if anybody tells you they know what's coming, they don't, not from scripture, they don't. They may guess. The Mormons have put forth a theory about that. But anyway, that's we're gonna wind it down there. Basically, all we have set up is a timeline. And the first video is all about the ages, that age of the fall of Adam, when they ate from that fruit, and the serpent seed war begins. Through that age, through the age of Abraham to the Messiah, the next age, and from the Messiah to the end of grace, the age of grace, the church age. That is basically what that serpent seed war video will be about. The second video will be this one. May call this one Time's Up into Grace in the Serpent Seed War, something along those lines. I don't know. But anyway, the next one, we're not going to be pulling up preachers and teachers and evangelists, what they have to say about the final timeline. Maybe one guy who's a scholar, biblical scholar that I really like, Tom Horn, will be on there. But other than that, this is going to be the creators of AI telling you what their warning is. The 2025 to 2027, it's over. These are the people that created it. That timeline. How 2025 to 2030, there will be a global economy that will enslave humanity. This coming from a woman who was an advisor to President Bush on housing development and financial matters. And she woke up and said, man, I was part of it. It's a lie. It's all been created to enslave humanity, and it's going to happen 2025 to 2030. All these people given the exact same timelines about an asteroid in 2029, Wormwood, Pophis. And people, it's not going to. Well, then your Bible just lied to you, because it says it'll happen. And it will happen 3.5 years into the tribulation, just before. So that timeline is stark. The vast majority of the population of the earth does not survive it. Matthew 24, verse 13. those that make it to the end, it says, will be saved. Not the ones that are poofed out in the rapture, but the ones that make it to the end will be saved. Um, but anyway, uh, this is going to be the perfect storm of all these events hitting in a 5 year period. Just thing after thing after thing after thing. What I didn't talk about today was, and where are we at in time, right? Uh, they sacrificed a red heifer back in July. The Temple Institute is saying, no, it wasn't legit. Byron Stinson, the man who put the whole deal together, brought the heifers from Texas, brought them to Israel nearly 3 years ago now. And he's saying, I was there when they sacrificed the heifer back in July. And he gives his testimony and he says, they told me it was real. So was it real? Was it, the Temple Institute said, no, it was a test run. We only did it as a test run. Byron Stinson is saying, no. They told me it was a real deal. And he's the one that set the whole thing up. So who's telling the truth? I don't know. But the point being, they sacrificed a red heifer. That is undisputed back in July. And where are we at in time? We've been talking about those red heifers for 3 years almost now, and they've actually sacrificed. It's just now coming out, a red heifer. And, that doesn't even make our Zoom today hardly. There are so many things happening in the world that didn't even hardly make the Zoom today, September 23rd, or excuse me, August 23rd and 24th. It's now 3 in the morning on the 24th. On the 23rd and into the 24th, there were earthquakes all around the world, unprecedented. An 8-point earthquake today, yesterday, I guess, maybe, in 23rd. But going into the 24th, these earthquakes are popping off all over the earth. Volcanoes are popping off all over. We didn't even talk about that today. Maybe on the next video we'll look at it, but unprecedented amount of big earthquakes happening, some in the Carolinas, in Texas, right? Multiple earthquakes today in those states. Didn't even get to talk about it because there's so many other things about to happen. But anyway, maybe next video we'll look at those things. But anyway, I'm going to shut it down here. I have no clue how long we've been recording. I may have to edit this heavily. But anyway, mainly these videos I'm putting out are mainly for our study group. If one of you happen to find it and you're curious about learning more, every Sabbath we're talking about this. Contact us at True Covenant Ministry, and we will add you to our link every week. But anyway, next week we're going to get into the nitty gritty about 2025 through 2030. Really, it's all over. According to all of these experts, it's over by 2030. It's all over by that point. So anyway, very near future. Anyway, we're going to shut it down here, guys. We love you, and we'll talk to you again next time.